Hello everybody and welcome back to the course. In this video and in the ones to come, we're going to learn all about loops in C#. So what are loops and why do we need them? So let's imagine that we wanted to print out the numbers from 1 to 10. With what we know so far, we would have to write 10 separate prints. Now let's imagine that we wanted to print out the first 100 or even the first 1000 numbers. Suddenly, it's going to take you an incredible amount of time and your scripts are going to be very messy. Now let's have a look at some more concrete game dev related examples. Let's imagine that in our game we have got a bomb, and when our bomb explodes, we want to deal damage to all the players that are in the bomb's radius. Well, with what we know so far, we would have to just print individually all the players that got hit by the bomb. So imagine 50 players got hit. We would have to write 50 times that each player got hit. Or maybe you're making a wave spawner and you want to summon 50 enemies. Well, with what we know so far, we would have to write 50 lines of code to do that. So all these examples are examples of not dry code. Dry is a very famous acronym in the coding world which stands for don't repeat yourself. So the concept is that we don't want to repeat our code. So for example, when we're summoning 50 enemies, this is not considered dry code because we are repeating the same exact line 50 times. We don't want to repeat ourselves in order to keep our scripts short, clean, and it will save you a lot of time. Because imagine you made a mistake and you want to summon a different kind of enemy, you would have to rewrite all the 50 lines of code to do so. So loops will allow us to dry up our code. There are several types of loops in C#, but in this course we're going to cover only 2 of them, but these are the ones that we use 95% of the time when making games. The first one is the while loop. The syntax for the while loop is almost identical than the if statement, except we're just changing the keywords if to while. So we basically write the keyword while, then we put a pair of parentheses, and then a pair of curly brackets. Inside of the parentheses is where we put a condition, and while that condition is true, then this loop will repeat any codes that we put inside of the curly brackets. So an if statement is the same, but if the condition is true, it will only run the code one single time, whereas the while loop will repeat that code as long as the condition is true. So this is how we would print out the numbers from 1 to 10 using while loops. So first of all, we're making an integer variable called number that is set to 1 by default. Then inside of the start function, we have got a while loop. The condition is number less or equal than 10. So the code that will go inside of the curly brackets will continue to run over and over again as long as our number variable is less or equal to 10. The code that will run is 2 lines. The first one is simply printing the number variable and the second one is adding 1 to the number variable. Okay, so now I'm going to bring you through how the computer will evaluate this code. So right at the beginning, our number variable is equal to 1. Then we're going inside the start function and we see that we have got a while loop. So we are checking if number is less or equal to 10. And remember, number is currently equal to 1, so this condition is true because 1 is less or equal to 10. Because the condition is true, we'll run the code inside of the curly brackets. So we are printing the number variable, which means that we are printing 1. And then we're adding 1 to the variable, so now number is equal to 2. Once all the code is run, we go back to the beginning of the while loop and we check the condition again. Is our number variable still less or equal to 10? Well, 2 is still less than 10, so we run the code again. Okay, so fast forward a couple of iterations, and now let's say that our number variable is equal to 10. Well, the condition is still met because 10 is still less or equal to 10, so we print out 10. And then we add 1 to our variable, which makes it equal to 11 now. So we go back to the top of the loop, and we check if 11 is less or equal to 10. And this time the condition is false, and so we don't run the code anymore. One important thing to keep in mind is to make sure that your loops are not infinite loops. Infinite loops are loops where the condition is always true. For example, if I make a while loop where the condition is 1 equals 1, well, this condition is always true and will never be false, and so it will cause your game to crash, so make sure that eventually the condition will be false. Okay, let's now talk about the second loop, which are called for loops. So as you saw with the while loop, there are 3 main parts that make the loop work. The first one is where we create the variable, Then we have got our condition, and right at the end we are modifying the variable. The for loop enables us to do all that in one single line. So this is the syntax for the for loop. We first of all write the keyword for, and then we put a pair of parentheses and then a pair of curly brackets. Like usual, the code that will run will go inside of the curly brackets, but what changes is what goes inside of the parentheses. There are three pieces that we have to put inside of the parentheses. The first step is to create a variable, so here I am creating an integer variable called I that has a default value of 1. The variable I is the conventional name to use when working with loops. Then we add a semicolon, and now we put in the condition, so in this case the condition is the same as the other example. We want this loop to run as long as I is less than or equal to 10. Then we put another semicolon and we finish off with the variable modification. In other words, what we want to do with the variable each time we run through the loop. And like in the other example, we will just add 1 to the variable I. And now inside of the curly brackets, I will just print out I. So as you can see, the for loop is basically exactly the same as the while loop. It just repeats code as long as a condition is true. But the syntax is slightly different. Both the while loop and the for loop have the three crucial parts, which are the variable creation, the condition, and the action that happens to the variable each time the loop runs. The while loop spreads out these three steps, whereas the for loop deals with these three steps in one single line. Anyways, that marks the end of this introductory video to loops. The main takeaway from this video should be that loops just make our lives easier and clean up our code significantly. You should also understand the syntax of the while loop and the for loop. Anyways, we have just begun to work with these loops. In the next video, we will have an exercise so that you can train using these new concepts that we have learned in this video. I'll see you over there.